I'm 72 years old. I've buried my wife, survived 2 wars, and raised my only daughter alone from the time she was 8. I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that phone call last Tuesday. My daughter Sarah's voice came through cheerful, almost singing as she said, "Dad, Tom and I need your beach house for 2 weeks starting Friday. It's for our honeymoon." My hand started shaking. Honeymoon? I didn't even know she was engaged. Honeymoon, sweetheart? The silence that followed felt like falling through ice. Then she said it. "Oh, Dad, we got married last Saturday. It was beautiful. She got married, my only daughter, the little girl I taught to ride a bike, who cried in my arms when her mother died, who I worked 3 jobs to put through college. She got married and didn't invite me, didn't call, didn't even mention she was engaged. But now she wanted my beach house, the one I'd spent 30 years paying for, where I taught her to swim, where we scattered her mother's ashes on her 10th birthday. The house I'd promised would be hers someday, when I was gone. It was intimate, Dad. Just close friends and Tom's family. You understand, right? We didn't want any drama. Drama. That's what I was now. An inconvenience. A source of potential drama at my own daughter's wedding. But what I did next? Well, some people will say I went too far. Others will say I didn't go far enough. You decide. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And hit subscribe, because this story gets much worse before it gets better. I said yes to the beach house. Of course I did. What was I supposed to say? No, you can't use it because you broke my heart. That would just prove I was the dramatic old man she apparently thought I was. So I told her the keys were in the usual spot, under the 3rd flower pot on the left. She thanked me, actually thanked me like I was some stranger doing her a favor, and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes, holding that dead phone, watching the sun set through the window, feeling something inside me crack open like a fault line. My wife Margaret died 14 years ago from cancer. Breast cancer that spread to her bones, her liver, her lungs. I watched her waste away over 18 months, held her hand through every chemo session, changed her bandages, emptied her bedpans, told her she was still beautiful when she couldn't recognize herself in the mirror. The night before she died, she made me promise 2 things. Take care of Sarah, and never let anyone make me feel small. I'd kept the first promise, but somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten the second. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation I'd had with Sarah over the past year, looking for clues I'd missed. Had she mentioned Tom more than usual? Had there been hints about wedding planning? But our calls had been brief, surface level. "How are you, Dad?" "Fine, sweetheart." "How's work?" "Busy. I'll call you next week." And she would, like clockwork, every Sunday at 7 p.m. for exactly 15 minutes. Duty calls. That's what our relationship had become. I got up at 4 a.m. and drove to my neighbor Helen's house. She's been my friend for 35 years, since before Margaret got sick. She answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and put the coffee on without asking questions. I told her everything. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and said something I'll never forget. "Robert, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Sarah had just shown me exactly where I stood in her life. But Helen said something else too. She said, "You have a choice now. You can accept this treatment and let it continue, or you can stand up for yourself. Your wife made you promise not to let anyone make you feel small. Sarah just made you feel invisible." She was right. Margaret wouldn't have stood for this. She would have driven straight to Sarah's apartment and demanded answers. But Margaret was brave in ways I'd never been. Still, sitting in Helen's kitchen at dawn, something shifted in me. I went home and did something I hadn't done in years. I went through the boxes in my attic, the ones filled with Sarah's childhood photos, school projects, report cards. There was a Father's Day card she'd made when she was 9, construction paper covered in glitter and crayon. To the best daddy in the world. I love you more than the moon and stars. Love, Sarah. I held that card and tried to remember when things changed. When did I stop being the best daddy in the world and become someone whose presence would cause drama at her wedding? The answer came to me around noon. It was Tom. She'd been dating him for 3 years, and from the first time I met him, I knew something was off. He was polite enough, successful, worked in finance, wore expensive suits, but there was a coldness in his eyes when he looked at me, like he was calculating my worth. At dinner that first night, he'd asked how much the beach house was worth. Not, "Tell me about the beach house," or "Sarah says you have wonderful memories there." Just, "What's the property worth these days?" I'd brushed it off then. I shouldn't have. I called my lawyer, Jim Patterson, that afternoon. We'd served together in Vietnam, and he'd handled Margaret's will. "Jim," I said, "I need to ask you something about property law." I could hear him sit up straighter. "The beach house. If I wanted to sell it, how quickly could it be done?" There was a pause. "Rob, what's going on?" I told him about the wedding, about the phone call, about the honeymoon request. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I can have papers drawn up by tomorrow." "But are you sure?" I wasn't sure of anything anymore. That evening, Sarah called again. "Dad, we're heading up Friday morning. Tom's so excited. He's never been to the Oregon coast." I could hear him in the background, laughing at something. "That's nice, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "Before you go, I need to ask you something. Why didn't you invite me?" Silence. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, "Dad, please don't make this difficult. It was our day. We wanted it to be perfect. Perfect. Apparently, I would have ruined perfect just by existing." "Did Tom not want me there?" I asked. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Dad, that's not fair. This was a mutual decision. We both wanted something small and private. But I knew." The way she said, "mutual decision," with that slight emphasis, the way her voice got defensive. Tom had convinced her. He'd probably said something like, "Do we really need your dad there? He'll just cry and make speeches and embarrass us." And my daughter, the girl I'd raised to stand up for herself, had agreed. "Okay, sweetheart," I said quietly. "You have a good honeymoon. The house is all yours." After I hung up, I sat in Margaret's chair, the one by the window where she used to read, and made a decision. My daughter wanted the beach house for her honeymoon. Fine, she'd get the beach house, but she was also going to get a lesson her mother would have taught her if she were still alive. Actions have consequences, and family isn't something you discard when it becomes inconvenient. I called Jim back. "Draw up the papers," I said. "I want to sell the beach house." "And Jim? I need it done before Friday." He tried to talk me out of it, said I should sleep on it, think it through. But I'd been thinking for 2 days straight. I'd thought about every birthday party I'd thrown her, every soccer game I'd attended, every college tuition payment I'd made. I'd thought about working 70-hour weeks so she could go to private school. I'd thought about turning down promotions that would have required moving because I didn't want to disrupt her life. Most of all, I'd thought about Margaret's last words to me. "Don't let anyone make you feel small, Robert. Not even Sarah. Especially not Sarah." My wife had known something I hadn't wanted to see. She'd watched Sarah become more distant during her illness, watched her make excuses not to visit, watched her focus on her career and her new boyfriend instead of her dying mother. Margaret had never said anything critical, but in those final days, she'd looked at me with such sadness and said, "Promise me you won't let her take you for granted." Wednesday morning, Jim called. "I found a buyer," he said, his voice careful. "A development company. They'll pay cash, close by Thursday afternoon." "Rob, this is really happening fast. Are you absolutely certain?" I thought about Sarah's voice on the phone. Cheerful, casual, entitled. I thought about her saying, "You understand, right?" As if my feelings were irrelevant. "I'm certain," I told Jim. "Draw up the papers." That afternoon, I drove to the beach house one last time. It was a 3-hour drive up the coast, and I hadn't been there in months. Sarah used to beg me to take her there every summer. We'd spend weeks swimming, building sand castles, barbecuing on the deck. After Margaret died, it became our healing place. We'd walk the beach at sunset and talk about her mother, keep her memory alive. Sarah would cry, and I'd hold her, and we'd promise each other we'd always be there for each other. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling on the north side, and the deck needed new boards. But it was still beautiful. I walked through every room, running my hands along the walls, remembering. Sarah's bedroom still had the same yellow curtains Margaret had sewn. The kitchen still had the table where we'd played cards on rainy days. The living room still had the fireplace where we'd roasted marshmallows. And the deck where we'd scattered Margaret's ashes, still had the view that took your breath away. I sat on that deck for 2 hours, watching the waves, talking to Margaret like I sometimes did when I was alone. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I told her, but I can't let her treat me like this. I can't let her think this is okay. The wind picked up, blowing cold off the ocean, and I swear I could feel Margaret there, hear her voice in my head. Stand up for yourself, Robert. Show her what she's losing. So I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Every room, every view, every memory. One last documentation of what this house meant. Thursday afternoon, I met the buyers at Jim's office. They were a young couple from California, developers who wanted to tear down the house and build something modern. They handed me a check for $850,000, more than I'd ever imagined the property was worth. I signed the papers with a steady hand, barely hearing Jim's final warnings. "Once this is recorded, there's no going back," he said. I nodded. I know. The house would officially change hands Friday morning at 9 a.m., exactly when Sarah and Tom were planning to arrive. Thursday night, I wrote Sarah a letter. I didn't mention the sale. She'd find out soon enough. Instead, I wrote about her mother, about how proud Margaret was of her, how she'd sacrificed everything for her future, how she'd died believing Sarah would carry on her legacy of kindness and family loyalty. I wrote about the day Sarah was born, the day Margaret died, and every important moment in between. And I ended with this. Your mother made me promise 2 things before she died. I've kept my promises. Have you kept yours? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with all the lights off, holding the wedding photo of Margaret and me, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Part of me wanted to call Jim, cancel everything, pretend Tuesday's call had never happened. But the larger part, the part that had been silent for too long, knew this was necessary. My daughter needed to learn that love isn't unconditional when it's only flowing one direction. That family isn't a convenience. That the people who raised you deserve more than an afterthought. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. I was up at dawn, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee I couldn't drink. My phone rang at 8:47 a.m. It was Sarah. Her voice was different now, confused, a little annoyed. "Dad, we're at the beach house. The locks have been changed. The code isn't working. Did you have maintenance done?" I took a slow breath, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. "Sarah," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the ocean in the background, the wind, Tom saying something I couldn't make out. "Dad?" Her voice had changed again, uncertain now, maybe even afraid. "What's going on?" I thought about hanging up, letting her figure it out on her own. But Margaret wouldn't have done that. Margaret would have made sure the lesson was clear, the point unmistakable. "I sold the beach house," I said. "The sale closed at 9 this morning. You're standing on property that no longer belongs to our family." The scream that came through the phone wasn't quite human. It was rage and disbelief, and something else. Maybe the first genuine emotion she'd directed at me in years. Tom was yelling now too, demanding answers. I heard Sarah sob, "Dad, what did you do? What did you do?" And for the first time in 3 days, I felt something that wasn't pain. I felt powerful. "I did what your mother would have wanted," I said calmly. "I stood up for myself. You didn't want me at your wedding because I would have caused drama. So I'm causing drama now. Congratulations on your marriage, Sarah. I hope Tom was worth it." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. But I was smiling. For the first time since Tuesday, I was smiling. The phone started ringing immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang 17 times in the next hour. Sarah, Tom, even a number I didn't recognize. I listened to the first few messages. Sarah crying, demanding explanations. Tom threatening legal action. Sarah again, her voice breaking. "Dad, please, this isn't funny. Please call me back." But I didn't call back. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee that had gone cold, looking at the wedding photo of Margaret and me, and waited for whatever came next. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this was just the beginning, that my daughter's betrayal ran so much deeper than a wedding invitation, that in trying to teach her a lesson, I was about to uncover secrets that would destroy what was left of our relationship forever. The voicemails kept coming. By noon, I had 43 missed calls. I finally listened to one from around 10 a.m. Sarah's voice was raw from crying. "Dad, we're homeless. Tom quit his job 2 months ago. We gave up our apartment because we were going to live in your house while he started his business. You just destroyed our entire plan. How could you do this to us?" My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Tom had quit his job. They were planning to live in my beach house? This wasn't about a honeymoon at all. I called Jim immediately. The beach house. How long were they planning to stay there? He put me on hold, came back 2 minutes later. "Rob, I did some digging. Sarah filed a change of address with the post office 3 weeks ago, to the beach house address. This wasn't a 2-week honeymoon. They were moving in." The room tilted. 3 weeks ago, before the wedding, before she even told me she was getting married. She'd been planning to take my house and hadn't even had the decency to ask. I sat down hard in Margaret's chair, my mind racing through the implications. Tom quit his job. They gave up their apartment. They needed somewhere to live rent-free while he started his business. And somehow, my daughter decided the solution was to move into my property without asking, without discussing, without even telling me. The wedding was just cover. The honeymoon story was just an excuse. They were going to show up, move in, and present it as a done deal. And I, stupid, trusting me, was supposed to just accept it. Helen came over that afternoon after I called her. She took one look at my face and poured us both whiskey even though it was only 2 p.m. I showed her the voicemails, told her what Jim had discovered. She sat back, shaking her head. "Robert, this was a con. Your own daughter was running a con on you." The word hit me like a fist. A con. My Sarah. But Helen was right. What else do you call lying about a honeymoon to steal someone's house? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Tom. "You're going to regret this. Sarah is having a breakdown because of you. We've lost everything, and it's your fault. You're a selfish old man who can't stand to see his daughter happy. We'll be contacting a lawyer about elder abuse and mental incompetence. You just declared war on your own family." I showed the text to Helen. She read it twice, her mouth set in a hard line. "Save that," she said. "Save every message. Tom just showed you who he really is. Elder abuse. Mental incompetence. He was threatening to have me declared unfit so he could take control of my assets. Margaret's life insurance, my pension, the money from the beach house sale. Suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. The distant phone calls over the past year, the lack of visits, Sarah asking detailed questions about my health, my memory, whether I was managing okay, living alone. They hadn't been checking on me out of concern. They'd been building a case. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept going through every conversation I'd had with Sarah over the past year, seeing them through this new lens. 3 months ago, she'd asked if I'd considered a retirement home. Just for the social aspect, Dad. You must get lonely. 2 months ago, she'd accidentally called me by Margaret's name twice, then asked if I'd been confused lately. Last month, she'd suggested I give her power of attorney, just in case something happens. My daughter had been systematically laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent. Saturday morning, I did something I should have done years ago. I went to my bank and asked for a full accounting of every transaction on every account. The manager, a woman named Patricia who'd known me for 20 years, asked if everything was okay. I need to know if anyone else has accessed my accounts, I told her. Her face went pale. Mr. Harrison, let me pull up your records. She disappeared into her office for 15 minutes. When she came back, she had papers and a very concerned expression. Mr. Harrison, 6 months ago, someone added themselves as a joint account holder on your savings account. It requires 2 signatures for withdrawals, but they have full visibility of the balance and transaction history. My heart stopped. Who? But I already knew. Sarah Harrison Miller. She came in with your power of attorney documents. We verified them with our legal team. They looked legitimate. Did you not authorize this? I had never signed any power of attorney, which meant the documents were forged. Patricia printed out every transaction on that account for the past 6 months. There were no withdrawals. They couldn't take money without my signature. But there were inquiries. Lots of inquiries. Someone had been checking the balance almost weekly, checking how much money I had. That account had $430,000 in it. Margaret's life insurance, money from selling our first house, decades of careful savings. Sarah and Tom had been watching that money like hawks, waiting for their chance. Patricia, I said, my voice shaking, I need that joint account holder removed immediately, and I need you to check every other account I have. It took 2 hours. They found that Sarah had also been added to my checking account and had requested information about my IRA and pension. She'd even asked about my mortgage status. I'd paid off my house 10 years ago. She wanted to know about every asset I owned. Patricia called the bank's fraud division. Mr. Harrison, if those power of attorney documents were forged, this is a serious crime. I stumbled out of the bank at noon, my legs barely holding me. My daughter hadn't just excluded me from her wedding. She'd been planning to steal everything I had. The beach house wasn't enough. She wanted it all. And Tom, Tom, had probably been the mastermind. I remembered that first dinner, how he'd asked about property values. He'd been assessing my worth from day one. And Sarah, my little girl, had gone along with it. Or maybe it had been her idea all along. Maybe I didn't know my daughter at all. I drove home in a daze and found 3 police cars outside my house. My heart nearly stopped. Had Tom made good on his threat? Were they here to do a wellness check? To evaluate my mental state? But when I pulled into the driveway, a young officer approached my window. Are you Robert Harrison? When I nodded, he said, Your daughter reported the beach house sale as elder financial abuse. We need to ask you some questions. I invited them inside. There were 2 officers, the young one, probably 30, and an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. They sat in my living room while I explained everything. The wedding I wasn't invited to. The honeymoon request. Jim Patterson's discovery about the change of address. The forged power of attorney documents. The joint bank accounts I never authorized. By the time I finished, the older officer was taking detailed notes, and the young one looked shocked. Mr. Harrison, the older officer said carefully, do you have documentation of these claims? I showed them everything. Jim's findings, the bank statements, Patricia's notes about the forged documents, Tom's threatening text message, every voicemail Sarah had left. The female officer's expression hardened with each piece of evidence. Mr. Harrison, I think you need to file a police report. What you're describing isn't elder abuse committed by you. It's attempted financial exploitation committed against you. After they left, I sat in the silence of my house and felt something break open inside me. I thought of Sarah at 8 years old, climbing into my lap after her mother's funeral, whispering, "It's okay, Daddy. I'll take care of you now." I thought of her at 16, defending me to her friends who said I was overprotective. My dad's not strict. He just loves me. I thought of her at 22, graduating college, thanking me in her speech. "Everything I am, I owe to my father." When had that girl disappeared? Or had she ever really existed at all? You know, I still remember the exact moment I realized something was different about Sarah. It was about 5 years ago, right after she met Tom. She'd always called me on Sundays, but suddenly the calls became shorter, more perfunctory. I'd ask about her life and get one-word answers. I'd share stories and hear her typing in the background. At the time, I told myself she was just busy, just growing up, just building her own life. Looking back now, I can see it was the beginning of her pulling away, the start of whatever plan Tom was whispering in her ear. Monday morning, my lawyer Jim called with news. "Rob, I contacted the DA's office. They're very interested in Sarah's forged documents. This isn't just fraud. It's identity theft, forgery, and attempted exploitation of an elderly person. These are serious felonies. My daughter was going to be arrested. My only child. The person I'd loved more than life itself. What happens now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "They'll want to interview you formally. Then they'll likely issue a warrant for Sarah's arrest. Rob, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted." What I wanted. What I'd wanted was my daughter at my side, growing old with me, bringing me grandchildren, keeping Margaret's memory alive. What I'd wanted was a family. Instead, I'd raised a stranger who saw me as nothing but a resource to be exploited. That afternoon, I went to Margaret's grave for the first time in months. I sat on the grass beside her headstone and told her everything. "I failed," I said out loud, not caring if anyone heard. "I was supposed to raise her right. I was supposed to teach her to be like you, kind, honest, loyal. Where did I go wrong?" The wind picked up, blowing leaves across the cemetery, and I heard Margaret's voice in my memory. "Robert, you can't blame yourself for the choices she makes. You gave her love. You gave her values. What she does with those gifts is her decision, not your fault." But it felt like my fault. It felt like I'd been blind to who she was becoming, too desperate to keep her in my life to see the truth. I'd made excuses for her distance, rationalized her coldness, accepted breadcrumbs of affection because I was terrified of losing her completely. Tuesday afternoon, Sarah showed up at my house. I saw her through the window, getting out of Tom's BMW, her face set and angry. She pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Dad, open up. We need to talk. This has gone far enough." I stood on the other side of that door, my hand on the knob, everything in me wanting to open it. Because despite everything, despite the lies, the theft, the betrayal, she was still my daughter. She was still the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder. She was still half of Margaret. But I didn't open the door. Instead, I called through it. "Sarah, the police are investigating you for fraud and forgery. My lawyer advises me not to speak to you directly. Anything you need to say should go through legal channels." The pounding stopped. There was a long silence. Then her voice came through, smaller now, almost childlike. "Daddy, please. I'm sorry about the house. I'm sorry I didn't invite you to the wedding. Can we just talk, please? I'm still your daughter." The daddy nearly broke me. She hadn't called me that in 15 years. It was calculated, manipulative, designed to open that door. And God help me, I almost did it. My hand actually turned the knob. But then I heard Tom's voice in the background. "Is he going to let us in or not? Tell him we have a legal right to discuss this." Legal right. As if this was a business negotiation, not a family crisis. As if I was an opponent to be defeated, not a father who'd given them everything. "Go away, Sarah," I said through the door. "If you want to talk, call your lawyer. Mine is Jim Patterson. You remember him. He helped pay for your college with the money he saved Margaret on her estate taxes. Tell your lawyer to call Jim. That's the only conversation I'm having with you." I heard her start to cry, heard Tom saying something harsh, heard their footsteps retreating to the car. I watched through the window as they drove away, and I collapsed against the door, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. Helen found me there an hour later. She had a key. I'd given it to her years ago for emergencies. She didn't say anything, just sat down on the floor beside me and held my hand while I cried. It was the first time I'd truly cried since Margaret died. Big, ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for my daughter who was gone. I cried for the family I'd thought I had. I cried for Margaret, who'd never see how our daughter had turned out. And I cried for myself, for the lonely old man I'd become, who'd been so desperate for love he couldn't see he was being used. Wednesday morning, the detective assigned to my case called. Her name was Linda Rodriguez, and she'd been investigating elder fraud for 12 years. "Mr. Harrison, I need to meet with you to get a formal statement. But I also need to tell you something. Your daughter and her husband are claiming you're experiencing dementia. They've provided statements from several people saying you've been confused, forgetful, and paranoid. They're building a counter case that you're mentally unfit and that they were trying to protect your assets, not steal them." The room spun. Of course they were. Tom had texted me about mental incompetence days ago. They'd already been planning this defense. "Detective, I can provide medical records," I said. "I just had a full physical 2 months ago. My doctor will testify I'm completely sound." She sighed. "Mr. Harrison, here's what I've learned after 12 years doing this job. These cases often come down to credibility. You say they forged documents. They say you're confused and don't remember signing them. You say they conned you. They say they were protecting you. The truth becomes whatever a jury believes." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at nothing. This was my life now. Not quiet retirement with occasional visits from my daughter. Not watching grandchildren grow up. Not growing old with family around me. Instead, it was police reports and lawyers and testimonies. It was my daughter telling strangers I was senile. It was fighting to prove I wasn't crazy while she tried to steal everything Margaret and I had built. This was what my life had become. I called Jim. "What are my chances?" "Honestly." He was quiet for a long moment. "Rob, if this goes to trial, it'll be your word against hers. You're 72, living alone, and she'll have people testify you've seemed confused. The jury will see an old man who maybe got upset about not being invited to a wedding and is lashing out at his daughter. Even with the forged documents, she can claim you gave verbal permission and just don't remember. It's not a guaranteed win." That night, I made a decision. If Sarah wanted to destroy me, I was going to make sure she destroyed herself in the process. I called Detective Rodriguez back. "I want to file charges. Everything. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, attempted exploitation. I want the full investigation." She tried to warn me how ugly it would get, how it would permanently destroy my relationship with Sarah. But that relationship was already dead. It had died the moment Sarah decided I was worth more to her in a bank account than in her life. What I didn't know, what I was about to discover, was that Sarah's betrayal went even deeper than I imagined. That the wedding, the house, the forged documents, all of it was just the surface. The real horror was still waiting to be uncovered. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to know, are you still with me? Drop a comment telling me what you'd do in my situation. Would you forgive your child, no matter what? Or are some betrayals unforgivable? Your answer might surprise you. The call came Thursday morning at 6 a.m. It was Detective Rodriguez, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to come down to the station. We've uncovered something in our investigation that you need to see in person. And, Mr. Harrison, you might want to bring your lawyer." The way she said it made my blood run cold. I called Jim, picked him up, and we drove to the police station in silence. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. What else could there possibly be? Detective Rodriguez led us to a conference room where a laptop was set up. "Mr. Harrison, in investigating the forged power of attorney, we subpoenaed your daughter's computer and phone records. We found something we weren't expecting." She turned the laptop toward us. On the screen was an email chain between Sarah and Tom, dated from 8 months ago. The subject line read, "The Plan." My vision blurred as I started to read. Tom had written, "Your dad's house is worth at least $200K. The beach house is probably $800K. Add his savings and life insurance, we're looking at close to $2 million. We just need to establish he's incompetent, get guardianship, and we can liquidate everything. The wedding is perfect cover. We'll act hurt that he's getting confused and paranoid. Use that to show declining mental state. 6 months max, and we'll have control of everything." And Sarah, my Sarah, had replied, "Let's do it. I'm tired of waiting for him to die. I'm tired of waiting for him to die." My daughter had written those words, had typed them out, read them back, and hit send. Jim grabbed my arm as I started to stand, to run, to get away from those words on that screen. But Detective Rodriguez wasn't done. "There's more," she said quietly. "We found their financial records. They've been in debt for 3 years. Tom's business is a gambling problem. They owe over $300,000 to various creditors. This wasn't just opportunistic, Mr. Harrison. This was desperate." She clicked to another email, this one from 6 months ago. Sarah to Tom. "I visited Dad today, brought up memory issues twice, and he looked worried. I think he's starting to believe he's having problems. We're close. Also, I recorded the conversation. He rambled about Mom for 20 minutes. We can edit it to make him sound confused." They'd been recording our conversations, taking my grief over Margaret, the most sacred, painful part of my life, and planning to weaponize it against me. Jim was reading over my shoulder, his face getting redder with each line. "Rob, this is it. This is proof of conspiracy to commit fraud. They weren't just planning to take your money. They were planning to have you declared incompetent and institutionalized so they could liquidate everything. Institutionalized. They were going to put me in a home, take everything Margaret and I had built, leave me in some facility to die alone, while they spent my money paying off Tom's gambling debts." There was one more email, dated just 2 weeks ago. Tom to Sarah. "After the wedding, we'll move into the beach house and start the process. Once we're living there, we can claim we're his caretakers. Document every confused thing he says. By Christmas, we'll have guardianship. By spring, we'll have the money." Sarah's response, "Perfect. And Tom? After we get the money, I'm done pretending to care about him. He's been nothing but a burden since Mom died. I can't wait to be free." I'm not sure how long I sat there staring at those words. Jim was talking to Detective Rodriguez about charges and evidence and trial strategy, but all I could hear was my daughter's voice in my head. I can't wait to be free. Free of me, her burden, the man who'd raised her alone, who'd worked himself to exhaustion to give her opportunities, who'd loved her with everything he had. I was nothing but a burden waiting to die so she could collect. Detective Rodriguez closed the laptop gently. "Mr. Harrison, with this evidence, we have multiple felony charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. That's the institutionalization plan. They're looking at 5 to 10 years in prison each. And, Mr. Harrison? I'm sorry. I know she's your daughter, but she was planning to destroy your life. She was planning to destroy my life, my daughter, my only child, the person I'd loved more than myself. What happens now?" I heard myself ask, my voice coming from somewhere far away. "We arrest them both. We'll do it today. We have enough for a warrant." Do you want to be present? Did I want to watch my daughter get arrested? Did I want to see the moment her plan fell apart? Part of me, the hurt, angry part, said yes. But the larger part, the part that still remembered her as a little girl, said no. I just want to go home, I whispered. Jim drove me back, neither of us speaking. When we pulled up to my house, I saw Tom's BMW parked across the street. They were watching me, waiting, still thinking their plan was going to work. In a few hours, police would arrive and arrest them both. Their perfect plan would end in handcuffs and jail cells, and I would be vindicated, proven right, protected by the law. So why did I feel like I'd lost everything that mattered? That afternoon, alone in my house, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got out the home videos from when Sarah was little, grainy footage of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and the beach house summers. Sarah at 5, laughing as waves chased her up the sand. Sarah at 10, reading to her mother in Margaret's hospital bed. Sarah at 16, hugging me tight after her high school graduation. I love you, Dad. I'll always take care of you. I watched these videos until I couldn't see through my tears anymore. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. It was Detective Rodriguez. It's done. We arrested them both an hour ago. Tom's already asking for a lawyer. Sarah hasn't said anything. She just keeps asking for you. She keeps asking for you. Even now, caught and cornered, she was still playing the role, still pretending to be the loving daughter who just made mistakes, still thinking she could manipulate me one more time. Tell her, I said slowly, that her burden is free now. And I hung up. I sat in Margaret's chair by the window, watching the sun set, holding the wedding photo of Margaret and me. I did it, I told her. I stood up for myself. I protected everything you and I built. But Margaret, God, Margaret, it hurts so much. The sunset painted my living room in shades of gold and orange, and I swear I felt her presence, felt her pride, felt her sadness. The evening news ran the story. Local woman and husband arrested for elaborate elder fraud scheme. They used Sarah's booking photo. She looked small, scared, nothing like the confident woman who'd called me about the beach house. The reporter called it one of the most calculated cases of family exploitation the county had seen in years. My phone started ringing. Neighbors, old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in ages. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay, if I needed anything, how they could help. But the only call I wanted, the only voice I wished I could hear, was the one that would never come. My daughter's voice saying, "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I love you. You were never a burden." That call wouldn't come because that daughter, if she'd ever truly existed, was gone. In her place was a stranger who'd typed, "I'm tired of waiting for him to die," and meant every word. That night, Helen came over with soup and sat with me while I couldn't eat it. "Robert," she said finally, "I need you to hear something. You didn't fail as a father. You gave Sarah every opportunity to be a good person. She chose not to be. That's on her, not you." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that I'd done everything right, and Sarah had just chosen wrong. But in the dark hours of that night, I couldn't help wondering if there'd been a moment I'd missed, a turning point where I could have stopped this. What I didn't know was that the worst was still ahead, that Sarah's arrest was just the beginning of a legal battle that would expose even more lies, more betrayals, more pain than I thought possible. That before this was over, I'd have to make a choice that would define the rest of my life. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks after the arrest. Jim called me every day with updates I didn't want to hear. Sarah had made bail. Some friend of Tom's family posted it. Tom was still in jail because his gambling debts meant he was a flight risk. Sarah's lawyer was building a defense around the idea that she'd been coerced by Tom, that she was a victim too. "It's the classic abuse defense," Jim explained. "Paint Tom as a manipulative villain and Sarah as his innocent puppet. The jury will eat it up. Young woman manipulated by older, controlling husband." But I'd read those emails. Sarah's words had been her own. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment of Sarah's childhood, looking for the crack where love had turned to greed. Was it when Margaret got sick and Sarah started spending more time with friends than at the hospital? Was it in college when she'd made wealthy friends and started comparing our modest home to their mansions? Or had it always been there, dormant, waiting for someone like Tom to water it and watch it grow? Maybe some people are just born with a piece missing, the piece that feels empathy and loyalty and love. I wore my Navy uniform to the hearing, the one I'd been married in, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. Jim had advised against it. "It looks manipulative," he said, but I needed the armor. I needed to remember who I'd been before all this, when I was a young man who believed in honor and sacrifice and protecting the people you love. The courtroom was cold and fluorescent bright. Sarah sat at the defense table in a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back, looking young and vulnerable. When our eyes met, hers filled with tears. I looked away. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The forged documents, the email chains, the bank records showing Sarah checking my account balances weekly, Tom's gambling debts, their plan to have me institutionalized. Each piece of evidence was a nail in a coffin. But then Sarah's lawyer stood up, and I watched my daughter transform. She began to cry. Real tears, not the calculated kind I'd seen before. She testified that Tom had threatened her, isolated her from me, convinced her I didn't love her anymore. He said my father was planning to leave everything to charity, that I'd get nothing. I was scared. It was masterful. It was also complete fiction. The emails Detective Rodriguez found showed Sarah had been the one pushing Tom to move faster, to be more aggressive. But Sarah sat in that witness box, looking broken and afraid, and I could see the judge softening. This was the danger Jim had warned about. A pretty young woman crying about an abusive husband versus an old man who'd sold a house out from under his daughter. The optics were terrible. During the lunch break, Sarah's lawyer approached me and Jim in the hallway. His name was Marcus Webb, expensive suit and shark's eyes. "Mr. Harrison, my client would like to speak with you privately. Just 5 minutes. She has something important to say." Every instinct screamed trap, but Jim nodded slightly. He wanted to see what she'd try. We followed Marcus to a small conference room, and there was Sarah, alone, her makeup smudged from crying. "Dad," she said, and her voice cracked. "Please, I know I hurt you. I know I did terrible things. But Tom made me believe." I held up my hand. "Stop. Just stop. I read the emails, Sarah. Your emails. I'm tired of waiting for him to die. Tom didn't write that. You did." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I was angry. I didn't mean it, Dad. I was overwhelmed with debt and stress, and Tom was in my ear constantly, and I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter. Please don't do this. Please don't send me to prison. I looked at this woman, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no pain. Just an emptiness where my heart used to be. You wrote that you couldn't wait to be free of me. Well, congratulations. You're free. I'm dropping the charges against you. Her face lit up with hope. But hear me clearly, Sarah. You're free of me too. Legally, financially, emotionally. I'm removing you from my will. I'm removing you from my emergency contacts. After today, you're nothing to me. We're strangers who share DNA, nothing more. The hope died in her eyes, replaced by something cold and hard. There was the real Sarah, the one who'd written those emails. You can't cut me out of your will. I'm your only heir. I'll contest it. I smiled, and it felt like ice. Contest away. I'm leaving everything to Margaret's cancer research fund. Every penny. The house, the savings, the beach house money, all of it. You can spend years fighting it in court, but you won't win. I've already signed the papers. I stood up. Goodbye, Sarah. I hope Tom's gambling was worth losing your father. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her scream, rage and desperation, and the sound of a plan falling apart. Jim caught up with me at the elevator. "Rob, are you sure about dropping the charges? She deserves to pay for what she did." I pressed the button for the ground floor. "She'll pay, just not in a way the courts can measure. She'll pay by knowing she destroyed the only person who ever loved her unconditionally. She'll pay every time she looks in the mirror and sees what she became." The prosecution wasn't happy about me dropping the charges, but they understood. They proceeded with the case against Tom. His charges were independent of Sarah's testimony. Without my testimony against Sarah, her lawyer worked out a plea deal: probation, community service, court-ordered therapy, and full restitution of the money she'd attempted to take. She'd have a criminal record, but no prison time. Tom, however, got 8 years for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. He'd rolled on Sarah initially, trying to reduce his sentence by claiming she'd masterminded everything. It hadn't worked. I didn't attend Tom's sentencing. I didn't need to see him led away in chains to feel justice was served. But I heard about it from Detective Rodriguez. She called me that evening, her voice careful. "Mr. Harrison, there's something you should know." Tom gave an interview to a reporter. He claims Sarah was planning to divorce him after they got your money. Said she'd been using him the whole time, that she was the real predator, and he was just as much a victim as you. I laughed, surprising myself. Maybe he's right. Maybe they deserved each other. 3 months passed. I threw myself into renovating my house, updating the kitchen Margaret had always wanted to remodel, painting the bedroom a color she'd loved. I joined a veterans support group and made friends I'd been too isolated to make before. Helen introduced me to her book club, and I discovered I actually enjoyed discussing literature with sharp, interesting people. Life went on. The sun rose and set. The world kept turning. And slowly, painfully, I started to heal. But healing wasn't linear. Some days I'd be fine, laughing with Helen over coffee, working in the garden Margaret had planted. Other days, I'd find one of Sarah's old drawings in a box and collapse, sobbing, grieving for the daughter I'd thought I had. Those were the days Helen would come over without calling, would sit with me in silence until the storm passed. "You're allowed to miss her," she'd say. "You're allowed to grieve. Just because she became someone terrible doesn't erase the little girl you loved." One morning, 6 months after the hearing, I received a letter. The return address was a domestic violence shelter 3 states away. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Mr. Harrison, my name is Rebecca. I'm a counselor at this facility. One of our residents showed me articles about your case. She asked me to write to you because she can't face contacting you directly. She's been here for 2 months, recovering from what she finally recognizes as abuse. Not from Tom, but from herself. She's working to understand how she became the person who hurt you." The letter continued. "She asked me to tell you she understands if you never want to hear from her again, but she wanted you to know she's been diagnosed with a personality disorder that went untreated for years. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it helps explain it. She's in intensive therapy. She's trying to become someone worthy of the father she had. She knows she can never undo the damage, but she wanted you to know she's trying." It wasn't signed by Sarah. It was just Rebecca's contact information if I wanted more details. I sat with that letter for 3 days. Part of me wanted to burn it, to let Sarah face her consequences alone, the way she'd planned to leave me alone in an institution. But another part, the part that still remembered her as a little girl who'd lost her mother, wanted to believe people could change. I called Rebecca. She was kind, professional, carefully neutral. "Mr. Harrison, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that your daughter is genuinely doing the work. She's facing things about herself that are terrifying to face. Whether you choose to be part of her recovery is entirely up to you." I asked the question that haunted me. Does she regret what she did? Or does she just regret getting caught? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Harrison, 3 weeks ago, one of our other residents was visited by her wealthy father. He offered her money to leave the shelter and come home. Your daughter spent 2 hours talking this woman out of taking it, telling her that money from people you hurt is poison, that real healing means learning to stand on your own. Make of that what you will. I made my decision that night, sitting in Margaret's chair with her photo in my hands. What do? I asked her, like I'd asked her so many times before. And this time, I swear I heard her answer. Clear as a bell, you show her what unconditional love really means. Not the kind that enables abuse, the kind that holds boundaries while keeping the door unlocked. You don't forget what she did, but you don't stop being her father either. Margaret had always been wiser than me. I wrote Sarah a letter. Not to the shelter. I didn't want to violate her privacy or her recovery process. I wrote to Rebecca and asked her to give it to Sarah when and if she thought Sarah was ready. The letter said, Sarah, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can ever look at you without seeing those emails, hearing those words. But I want you to know something. When you're ready, when you're truly healthy and whole, my door isn't locked. I won't leave you money. I won't give you the beach house. I won't enable you to hurt me again. But if you want a father who will sit across from you at a coffee shop once a month and listen to how therapy is going, I can be that. If you want someone to call on your birthday to say, I'm proud you're doing the work, I can be that. I can't be the father who pretends none of this happened, but I can be the father who sees you trying and respects that. The choice is yours. Dad. I mailed the letter and felt a weight lift I didn't know I'd been carrying. I wasn't forgiving Sarah. I wasn't letting her back into my life unconditionally. But I was leaving the door unlocked for a person who might not exist yet. The person Sarah could become if she did the work. Margaret would have approved. She'd always believed people deserved chances to change, but only if they earned them. 2 months later, I received a response. Sarah's handwriting, shaky but clear. Dad, I don't deserve your letter. I don't deserve your conditional presence, but I'm grateful for it. I can't take back what I did. I can't undo the words I wrote or the plans I made. I can only tell you I'm starting to understand the depth of what I destroyed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for time. Time to become someone who might deserve a monthly coffee with her father. Time to prove that the little girl who loved you is still in here somewhere, buried under years of sickness and greed and whatever broke inside me. Thank you for not locking the door. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to knock on it, but knowing it's unlocked means everything. I keep that letter in Margaret's Bible, next to the wedding photo of us. Some days I take it out and read it, and I feel hope. Other days I take it out and feel only sadness for what we lost. But both feelings are real, both are valid, and I'm learning to hold them simultaneously. This isn't a story with a neat ending. It's not a story where the daughter has a tearful reunion with her father, and everything is magically okay. Maybe that reunion will happen someday. Maybe it won't. Either way, I'm learning to be okay with not knowing. What I do know is this. I stood up for myself. I protected what Margaret and I built. I drew boundaries that will never be crossed again. But I also left the door unlocked for redemption, because that's what love is when it's real. Not blind acceptance of abuse, but clear-eyed recognition of potential. Sarah will never be the daughter I thought I had. But maybe, someday, she'll be the daughter she could have been all along if she'd gotten help earlier. Last week, I got a photo in the mail. No return address. But I recognized Sarah's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a picture of her. Thin, tired-looking, but with something different in her eyes. Something clear. On the back, she'd written, 6 months sober from gambling, 4 months in therapy, learning to be someone you might not hate, still not ready to knock on that door, but working toward it. Thank you for leaving it unlocked. I put the photo on the mantel next to Margaret's. 2 women I love in different ways, for different reasons. Helen came over for coffee that morning and saw the photo. "Is that—" I nodded. She studied it for a long moment. "What does this mean, Robert? Are you letting her back in?" I poured the coffee. Margaret's favorite mugs that I'd kept all these years. "No, I'm acknowledging she exists, and she's trying. That's not the same as letting her back in. She has to earn that. Maybe she never will. But she's my daughter, Helen. As much as I wish she wasn't some days, she is. And I'm choosing to be the kind of man who leaves doors unlocked for people doing the work to change." We sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee as the morning sun filled my kitchen with light. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined when Sarah called me about the beach house. It wasn't the victory I'd wanted when I sold it out from under her. It wasn't the justice I'd craved when I learned about the emails. But it was real. It was honest. It was the messy, complicated truth of loving someone who hurt you and learning to love yourself enough to set boundaries while still hoping they might change. You know what's strange? I'm happy now. Not every day, but most days. I'm happy in ways I wasn't before this all happened. When I was desperately clinging to a daughter who saw me as an obstacle. I have friends. I have purpose. I volunteer at the Veterans Center, teaching younger vets about coping with loss. I've started painting, something Margaret always encouraged me to try. I've learned that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover what you actually need. The beach house money is sitting in an account for Margaret's Cancer Research Fund. I'll donate it next month, on what would have been our 50th anniversary. Sarah will get nothing from my estate when I die. But you know what? If she keeps doing the work, if she keeps trying to become someone better, I might leave her something else. Not money, not property, but letters. All the letters I wrote to Margaret after she died, telling her about my day, asking her advice, keeping her alive in my heart. Maybe Sarah would benefit from seeing how love is supposed to work, how you care for someone even when they're gone, how loyalty isn't conditional on convenience. I'm 72 years old. I've lived through wars, buried my wife, survived my daughter's betrayal, and come out the other side still standing. Some people might say I should have fought harder to send Sarah to prison, that I let her off too easy. Others might say I'm a fool for leaving that door unlocked, that she'll hurt me again the first chance she gets. Maybe they're both right, but this is the choice I made. Not out of weakness, but out of the kind of strength Margaret taught me. The strength to hold boundaries while keeping hope alive. Next week, I'm going to Margaret's grave. I'll tell her about the letter, about the photo, about the choice I made. I'll ask her if I did the right thing. And I know what she'll say, because I've carried her voice in my heart for 14 years. You did what love required, Robert. Not blind love that accepts abuse, but clear-eyed love that recognizes potential while protecting yourself. You're going to be okay. You both are, eventually. And I'm choosing to believe her. So that's my story. My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding, tried to steal everything I had, planned to have me institutionalized, and wrote that she was tired of waiting for me to die. And I sold her beach house, exposed her plan, almost sent her to prison. And then, when she started doing real work to change, I left the door unlocked, not open. Unlocked. There's a difference. Do I still hurt? Every single day. Do I trust her? Not even a little bit. But do I hope she becomes someone worthy of that unlocked door? Yeah, I do. Because that's what fathers do, even when their daughters break their hearts. What do you think? Was I too soft? Too hard? Just right? I honestly don't know. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done. And if you have a story about family betrayal or forgiveness, or that messy middle ground where most of us actually live, share it. We're all just trying to figure out how to love imperfect people in an imperfect world. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel. I have more stories like this, real stories from real people who've survived the unthinkable. And most importantly, If you're estranged from someone you love, maybe think about what your unlocked door looks like. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just the possibility of it, if they do the work. Sometimes that's all we can offer. Sometimes it's enough. Thanks for listening. Until next time.